And then a second but parallel answer, I would have liked to have, how can I put this? I should have developed more self-confidence. At college, I learned a lot and I had a great time, but I left college, went into business without a very strong sense of self-confidence. And I really had to learn that for myself later on. So self-confidence, communication skills, and a broader understanding of the aviation business.
So to build off of your response, sometimes students here, as they move up along their career, they may feel a bit, like of an imposter, or maybe sometimes they feel like they're not qualified enough. How do you overcome that?
You simply have to believe in yourself. Believe in yourself, and along with that, try and believe in others as well. It makes life easier. So if you believe in yourself, then you can start to aim high. Then you can start to think big. And really, it sounds incredibly simple advice, but that's the best advice I can give you. Whenever you think that, hey, how am I going to do this? Just have confidence in yourself. Think really big and aim for that. Even if you only get halfway there, it'll be great.
Thank you. And if you could give your younger self advice, what would it be?
Basically, what I just said. Think big. I was probably between 5 and 10 years into my business career when I began to realize that my bosses were actually listening to me, and my peers were actually listening to me, and that gave me a lot more confidence. And once that happened, I started to sort of come out of my shell a bit more. And really, that was the beginning, if you like, of my career trajectory.
And to build off of that, were there any mentors along the way that have helped you? And if you did have a mentor or mentors, what did you look for in them? Like, what helped
So
you
I'm
as
a
far as?
strong, I'm a strong, I'm sorry, Sophia. I'm a strong believer in mentors.
Mm-hmm.
And I would counsel everyone who's listening today to take advantage of whatever mentorship you can find. Yes, I had several mentors. At college, I had a mentor. He was one of our professors, but he particularly took me under his wing to teach me, if you like, everything that he knew. One of my first jobs at Rolls-Royce, my boss at the time, Alan Smith, who has passed on now, I spoke at his retirement party. And I talked about Alan, that it would have been great if I could say, Alan taught me everything I knew, but that would not be true. What Alan did do was he gave me the chance to learn everything that he knew. And that was, to me, the true value of a mentor. So yes, I've been lucky, I've had several mentors, and it's been a real boost to my career.
Thank you. Yes, I agree too. And like the professors here, I think, serve as mentors for the students here. And just along the way, eventually like it comes around and you become a mentor to others.
Exactly.
So concluding with this section, as graduates now, given the turbulent nature of world politics, the pandemic, and other things beyond our control, how can we position ourselves for success?
Yes, it's a very challenging time in the world at the moment. I would say that the industry, as you probably know from your own data, the industry at the moment has a greater demand for skilled innovation than it has ever done before. In fact, I was listening to a speech by the head of Boeing Commercial Airplanes, Stan Deal. This was about three weeks ago. And Stan was asked the same question, what's the biggest challenge? And the biggest challenge for him is recruiting skilled labor. Our industry is up against a lot of challenges, a lot of competition from people like Microsoft and Amazon and Apple, and the new startups in the space business and the AAM business. And so we have to double our efforts, if you like, to recruit the best people into aerospace. In previous years, that just used to happen. When I graduated in 1969, it was a great year, very inspirational year. The first flight of Concorde, first flight of the 747, Apollo 11 landing on the moon. There was no lack of inspiration. These days, that inspiration is not there. And these days, there's a lot more competition for the best minds. But boy, does our industry need the best minds right now. So I guess I would say to your students about to enter our business, first of all, keep the fire in your belly. I could tell you a long story about how I was told to keep the fire in the belly, but that's another time. Secondly, never stop learning. And no matter how far into your career you are, no matter how old you are, never stop learning. Keep learning new stuff, hopefully about our business. Network. In the same way as I always encourage people to develop mentors, I always encourage networking. It's a great way to never stop learning, but it's a great way to move on in your career as well. If you can, join a winning team. But most of all, and I keep reiterating this message, believe in yourself. Yes, it's a tough time, but believe in yourself. The industry always overcomes these challenges. We always have, and we always will. And we'll do it because we have people who believe in themselves.
Thank you. And great transition to the next part. What motivated you to pursue a career in aviation?
As a kid, I was always interested in transport. Transport sort of represented going to see new places, learn new things. And then, of course, I kind of got hooked on flying because that is the ultimate way of going to see new places and see things from a different point of view, obviously from 2,000 feet or from 40,000 feet. You're seeing the world from a different point of view. But more importantly, the airplane has changed the world in the way that we've allowed other cultures to come together and people to learn about other cultures and see things from a different point of view. It all sounds rather sort of esoterical, but that was how it worked for me.
That's nicely put. And then what do you consider to have been your biggest professional success, or like personal achievement could also work?
So I love it when people say it can't be done, especially if the boss or my peers say it can't be done. And then you should think to yourself, oh yeah, well, just let me show you. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how that worked for me, and therefore I consider my successes. One was the International Aero Engines venture, the V2500 airplane engine. It's one of the most successful airplane engines there's ever been. It's on the Airbus A320. Right now, there's over 8,000 engines in service. I was at the launch of that program in 1984, 1st of January 1984. Rolls-Royce and Pratt & Whitney got together with others and launched that program. And I was dispatched by Rolls-Royce to go to East Hartford, Connecticut and join this new joint venture. And the guy in Rolls-Royce who was sending me out there, he said, Barry, a word of advice. He said, don't sell your house in England. This program's going to fail and you'll be back in 6 months' time. That was in 1984. So here we are, whatever that is, 36 years later, 8,000 engines later, one of the most successful programs ever. So I consider that, I went back later on to actually run the program, as Dean Gibson said. So I consider that to be one of my personal successes. A second one, in 2010, Airbus launched the A320 Neo program. Some of you may be familiar with it. And the challenge was to sell it to a number of new customers. We knew we could sell it to existing A320 customers. We did not know if we could sell it to people who did not have Airbus airplanes. And we were able to put together a deal in 2011 with American Airlines for 240 A320 family Neo airplanes. And again, it was a situation where my boss at the time, John Leahy, said it can't be done, but we did do it. Not only that, but it actually caused Boeing to launch what became the 737 MAX, which was exactly what Airbus had hoped Boeing would do. If Boeing had launched a new airplane at that time, it would have really changed Airbus's strategy dramatically. But the American Airlines deal caused Boeing to launch the MAX, and Airbus was fairly content with that. So again, a deal that they said can't be done, but we as a team, not just me, but we as a team made it happen.
Thank you. And will you speak to a time you made a poor decision or a mistake and what you learned from it? How did you adapt going forward?
Well, there's actually several of those occasions. Everyone, all of you are going to run into this at some point when things are not going so well. I'm going to give you, if I may, three examples in my career. In 1993, I was working for Rolls-Royce North America as the head of sales at Rolls-Royce Sales in North America, and this had gone quite well. So Rolls-Royce decided to offer me a step up and sent me to Canada to run Rolls-Royce in Canada, which was several different businesses grouped under a country organization. But they were all primarily operational businesses. It was pretty much nitty-gritty operational stuff, engine overhaul, airplane overhaul, power generation. So I went up there full of confidence and quickly learned that my operational skills were nowhere near where they should be. It was very challenging time for me. I knew that, my bosses knew that. Basically, I was unprepared for that sudden switch from the external side of the business to the internal side of the business. I did that job for 2 years. It was not that bad, but then I found my way back into another external role where I was much more comfortable. Later in life, when I was at Honeywell, I learned a lot about operational businesses, and by then I'd learned how to do it reasonably well, and in particular program management, which is a story for another day. So yeah, moving from an external role, sales and marketing, to a very much operational role, that was tough. In 2002, I was working for Fairchild Dornier, and the company went bankrupt. It was post 9/11. The whole business was in the mess. We ran out of cash, and when you run out of cash, you go bankrupt. I learned a lot about bankruptcy, about Chapter 11 bankruptcy in particular. And I also learned a lot about myself, because for 6 months I was out of a job. And my wife said I was basically unlivable with. I was just frenetic. But at the end of it, I learned a little bit about patience. I'd like to think I'm more patient now. But all the headhunters said, Barry, it's going to take 6 months. It was actually 6 months to the day when I got my next job, in that case with Honeywell. But for those 6 months, it was a really challenging time for me personally. And you have to learn to manage your emotions and believe in yourself, back to believing in yourself. My third comment is, I referenced a couple of successful programs and deals, but we also had along the way a couple of big deals that I lost. And by the way, as you well know, if you're the leader and you're successful, then you credit the team. If you're the leader and you're not successful, then you have to carry the blame. And I did. I was quite ready to do that. One of them, I'd just become the head of IAE, the president of IAE, and we were doing a deal with an airline. And like all new heads of businesses, like all new CEOs, I said to myself, I can do it better than my predecessor. And I thought I could make a better deal than my predecessor had done a few years earlier. We lost the deal. And I learned that you can't just go in and do things differently just because you're the new boss. So that was one, and there's been other situations like that. But every time I lost the deal, and I say I because I take the blame for it, you basically have to sit down and say, well, what did I learn from that? Pick yourself up and go on to the next one.
Thank you. So that was the next question. What is the hardest part of being a leader? So based on what you just said, would you say it's taking the blame for when things go wrong?
No, that's not the hardest part. It's not a pleasant part. It's a very difficult part, but it's not the hardest part. To me, the hardest part is making tough decisions quickly, and in particular when it comes to people. The first time I had to fire somebody, I went home and I was physically sick that evening. I hate to say this, but you don't get used to it. You never get used to it, but it gets easier. You get more professional at it later on. But the first time I ever fired somebody, that was really challenging. But the point was, everybody in the organization knew that this particular person was not pulling his or her weight, and that it was the right thing to do would be to move them out. And I let it go on for far too long. I didn't take the tough decision quickly enough. So that to me was the hardest part. There's lots of other tough pieces, but that was by far the hardest.
Thank you. And we know that the aviation and aerospace industries are resilient and they consistently come back from the challenges the world throws at us. What do you expect to be the primary challenges the industry faces in the next 5 to 10 years? And what organizations are suited well to tackle them? And what organizations of their characteristics do you think that they will struggle with the most?
Okay, three questions there. The primary challenges facing the industry as a whole over the next 5 years, one we already mentioned, finding enough skilled labor. We already have programs that are running late because we don't have enough people to work on them. We have MRO businesses running late because we don't have enough people. We have airlines canceling flights and routes because we don't have enough pilots. So the biggest problem right now is finding enough people throughout the entire aviation ecosystem, preferably enough skilled and experienced people. The second challenge is the environmental challenges. Europe has seen the environmental challenges for several years. It's now much stronger over here in Europe, but it's now coming to the US as well, and indeed the rest of the world, as we have seen very heavily. And so our industry really has to be much more proactive in taking actions to show that we are addressing the environmental challenges that the world faces. The third issue is execution, and in particular execution on new technologies. If you look at pretty much every aerospace program there is, it's running late, it's over budget, it's got challenges because we, the industry, are not very good at program management and we're not very good at execution. And we have to get better at that if we're going to achieve our true potential with the limited number of people that we've got. Back to item. And then, of course, obviously through these numerous challenges that are facing the industry all at the same time, energy crisis, people crisis, the geopolitical crisis, so the environmental crisis, so many different things coming at us at the same time. We will find a way through it, we always do. And the demand for our product, be it people wanting to fly on airlines or be it defense businesses, the demand is as strong as it ever was. But we just have to find a way to manage all these challenges at the same time. Now, your second question, which types of organizations are well suited to this? Well, first of all, the ones that get results, positive results, obviously. You never have to forget that if you're in business, if you're leading a business, your number one priority is to get successful results for the business. The second answer is to listen to your customers, and more importantly, try and meet your customers' needs. But you really have to have a very clear understanding. Successful businesses do have a very clear understanding of what their customers are looking for and what they expect of them. The third thing is to have very competitive products. If you look at my old company, Airbus, they're in a pretty strong position because they've got 2 or 3 really good products, the A321neo in particular right now. So you have to figure out how to get yourself in a position where you have really good products that work really well in a marketplace that the customers want to be in. The next thing is to address culture, because organizations really need to have the right culture. And to me, that's a number of things. First of all, it's what I'm going to call the stakeholder model. There's a lot of discussion going on at the moment about is the shareholder model, that is to say, make money for the business and the shareholders, or is the stakeholder model the right way to go. I tend to believe in the stakeholder model. Yes, the business has to be successful. Yes, the business has to make money. But I believe that in doing that, we also have to satisfy the other constituents, such as the employees, the customers, the regulators, the investors, and basically all elements of the business. Try and bring together all those elements of the business in what we call a stakeholder model, as opposed to just focusing on making money. And I believe that will be one of the characteristics of successful companies going forward. And then the final comment I would make relates to leadership. You have to have capable, experienced leadership who are prepared to take the tough decisions, to not shy away from change, to address change and manage change and lead change. And basically, if you can, try and have a little bit of entrepreneurial flair in there. Too many businesses these days have lost their appetite for risk. It's understandable. It's a tough business. A lot of things going wrong. But we cannot lose our entrepreneurial flair or our appetite for risk. We just have to manage the risk better. Can you hear me? Can you hear me still?
Yes.
Okay. And then I've got one more answer. I think it's your third question. Characteristics of organizations that struggle the most. Very briefly, the ones that do not address change, the ones who are not prepared to address change, the ones who have a certain level of, I'll call it, arrogance, because they've been successful in the past and believe that as a result of that, they're entitled to be successful in the future. The businesses that practice business as usual, the businesses that have a directive management style as opposed to a collegiate management style. So these are the sorts of businesses I would look at and say, you're going to have to change if you want to meet the challenges of the future.
Thank you. That was basically answering the next question, what should the industry be doing on how it should evolve or continue positioning itself for long-term profitability?
You're right. We've touched upon a little bit of that already. And when you say the industry, it's a little bit different depending whether the industry is the manufacturing industry, the airplanes and engines, or whether it's the airline industry or the defense business. Excuse me. For a manufacturing business, which has been my history, we already mentioned the right product, the right competitive products coming to the right marketplace. Find and keep the best people and develop strong teams. That may involve paying them a bit more money than we're looking at right now to compete with the likes of Amazon and so on. Partnership with, particularly with your supply chain. You are nowhere without an effective supply chain. An airplane is a million parts flying in formation, as you guys well know. You have to have every one of those million parts. So if one tier 3 or tier 4 supplier doesn't deliver that part, the airplane doesn't fly and nobody gets paid. So manage, not just manage, but partner with your supply chain. And in doing so, look for innovation through the supply chain as well. Invest in technology. There's been a habit recently of stopping investing in technology, basically just continuing to build what we've already got, basically reaping what we sowed several years ago. One of the first things I learned in my very first job in Rolls-Royce was a saying, and the saying was, aerospace is like a tree. If we're not growing, we must be dying. So we always have to keep reinvesting in the technology in the business. The stakeholder business model, partnership with all those stakeholders we talked about already. You obviously have to have high integrity. I'm a strong believer in never say or do anything or put on social media anything that you don't want your mother to read about the next morning. So please, everybody, whatever you do, maintain high integrity. You have to be environmentally conscious. most of my career, that was not an issue. These days, for you guys, it is an issue, and it's going to be an even bigger issue over the next few years. And then finally, listen to your customer. Stay very, very close to your customer. Understand everything about your customer's business. Your customer could be, in my case, it was mostly an airline customer. It could be the government. It could be a tier 1 supplier because you're a tier 2 or 3 supplier. But whoever it is, get close to your customer and understand their needs. If you're an airline, slightly different. There's in the airline business these days, there is a huge amount of new technology, and in particular in the distribution field. That's to say, marketing and selling tickets and beating your competition to the customer's need. And the technology change there is huge. Indeed, the technology change, I suppose I should mention, in the OEM business is huge as well. DDMS, Industry 4.0, robotics. And so I'll conclude this question by saying technology is probably going to be the single biggest thing that is going to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years. And it is changing everything, but we have only just begun to think about how it can change even more.
Thank you. And so these last few questions are really about you as a person. So if you could have any talent or skill or any skill that you don't have, what would it be and why?
I'd love to be able to dance because my wife likes to dance and I cannot do it for the life of me. And I really love to be able to dance with my wife, do it properly. I'd also like to be able to play a musical instrument, guitar, piano, whatever. So I never had time, never had the aptitude to do it. But yeah, that's one talent I really wish. Music and dance, I really wish I was better at that.
I mean, it's never too late. And then following up with that, what is your favorite pastime?
Oh, flying airplanes. I got my private pilot's license about 35 years ago. For most of my career, I was far too busy to really do much with it. About every 60 days, I'd go out to the airport, do my mandatory 3 terms in the pattern and say I'm current. Of course, I really wasn't. And then I retired and I thought, well, I really want to get into flying a little bit more seriously because I love it. And one of the first things I did, I found my wife and I were in Florida, and I went to get checked out. We were in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I went to get checked out on a 172 at the local flying school, and I failed the checkout. And it was a big turning point in my, I'll call it flying career, because it finally dawned on me I was not actually a very good pilot, and that was really bad. So I resolved to fix this. Over the next 15 months, I got my instrument rating. It's really helpful, but also it made me a much better pilot. I got my tail drag out landing so I could really learn how to land an aeroplane properly. I went down to Jack Brown Seaplane Base in Orlando and got my seaplane rating. Right now, my wife and I, we got a little 172, and we got a little Cirrus, an SR series Cirrus, both of which I fly and love it, but both of which we also rent to local flying schools up where we live, because it gives the students an opportunity to.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the last part? I think it got cut off.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Matt, I've got a little bit of a problem with the bandwidth here, I think. So I mentioned that my wife and I have a 172 and we have a Cirrus, and in both cases, we rent the aeroplanes to the local flying schools so that the kids have, or the students have something to learn to fly on. As you know, there's lots of demand to learn to fly right now, but I also love flying both those aeroplanes.
Thank you. And if you could have dinner with any person, past or present, who would it be and why?
Well, the first answer is obviously my wife, Valerie. She put up with me not being at home for 40 plus years. So now I'm retired, I really enjoy having dinner at home with my wife. Unfortunately, she has to cook it. She doesn't have to, but she loves to, and she does really well. So I love having dinner at home with Valerie and having her food. But I think your question was probably a little deeper than that. So there's a couple of people who I'll call them been my heroes throughout my career. They've been my heroes. One is Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon, now has passed, of course. And the other is Sir Frank Whittle, who was the British inventor of the jet engine. Both of these people changed the world. Both of these people changed the way we think about the world with what they did. Neil by showing that man could go to the moon, which was a very brave thing to do. And Sir Frank by basically developing a product which allowed the world to connect itself. So both these people changed the world. And imagine how fascinating that conversation is going to be. But also, both of these people are just plain, simply nice people. I mentioned I'd like to do that. Well, I have in fact had the opportunity to do that. What I learned, which was just amazing, was that both of these people are incredibly nice people. Neil went to the moon and came back, and imagine what he could have done with that achievement, but he didn't. What he did do was he went back to Ohio and went back to teaching at college. And he loved to fly, and he loved to talk about flying and piloting. And what he didn't want to do was talk about, I'm the man who went to the moon. He was a very, very, very humble guy, and I thought that was terrific. Frank Whittle was a genius. In my mind, was the genius, not just because he invented the jet engine, but I can remember in his last few years, he was well into his 80s. We were having a conversation one night, and this must have been 20 years ago, and he was predicting the coming climate change, the carbon dioxide problem, and he was predicting what was going to happen, and that was 20 years ago, and he got it all spot on. And the guy at the time was well into his 80s. He was just a genius. Anyway, I digress. Those are the two people that have been my heroes.
Thank you. And do you have any favorite charity, and why do you like it?
I've been privileged to have been in the aerospace industry my entire career. I loved every minute, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat. So to me, the important thing now is to give back to the aerospace industry. As Dean Gibson mentioned, I'm a past president of the Wings Club, so I do a lot of work with the Wings Club. Wings Club actually is a foundation. Yes, it's a club, and we do club type things, but it's actually as a foundation with the objective of raising money and helping students, aeronautical students, go to college. So I do a lot of work with them. I do a lot of work with my old alma mater in England, Loughborough University. Valerie and I have been funding a couple of projects at the university, or actually 3 or 4 projects at the university. We're doing another one at the moment, all of which is aimed at encouraging not just aeronautical students, but female aeronautical students, diversity in the aeronautical business. And then finally, speaking of diversity, I'm on the Board of Regents at Vaughan College up in New York. You guys are probably aware of it. I worked with Vaughan for several years, and I'm now on the Board of Regents there. And I love that because I forget the exact number. It's like 93% of the students. It's the first time anybody in their family ever went to college. It's a very diverse population, and of course, it's all aeronautical. So the short answer is I work with charities that are involved in protecting the past heritage of the aviation business and generating the next generation that will guard that heritage.
Thank you. And do you have any final words for the future generation?
We've said it all already. Believe in yourself. Think big. Be humble. Be high integrity. As my old boss at Airbus used to say, the sky is not the limit in this business. Just believe that.
And thank you. And thank you for your inspirational words today. And thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Now I think we are opening to the audiences. Any questions from the audience? Q&A.
I have several Q&A for you, Barry. They've been putting them up while we've been chatting. And before I forget, I have to say thank you. I feel like I've been sitting in a master class and it's been really wonderful. So we've got some fun questions and we've got some tough questions here. I think I'm going to start with one that I love. Comes from a member of my business leadership board. As we celebrate Women's History Month, who is the woman you admire most?
I mean, apart from my wife, obviously.
Smart
Who's
man.
the woman?
Good answer.
Yeah, who's the woman that I admire most in our business? Now that one I have to think about for a minute. It would be easier to say something like Amelia Earhart, but I'm not, because she was inspirational at the time, and she was way ahead of her time in pushing the diversity agenda in the aeronautical business. But I hope I don't embarrass her by saying that at the moment there's another lady that I particularly am impressed with. You probably never heard of her, maybe you have. It's Dawn Hickton. Dawn used to run a supply business in the aero engine business. It was bought out by Arconic, and Dawn went on to become the leader of one of the major businesses at Jacobs Engineering. Dawn falls into this category of being inspirational. She's not sort of, how can I put it? She doesn't go out and deliberately push the female agenda, but she gently prods and pushes and urges and makes sure that by using her own example, if you like, she makes sure that the female agenda is at the forefront. She has an HR lady. In fact, Jacobs has an HR lady by the name of Shelley Gustafson. Shelley is one of the leading lights when it comes to female diversity and particularly in the engineering industry, including aviation. And Dawn has been helping Shelley with that agenda. And Dawn is also just a downright terrific person. And she just fits right in with all the rest of the leadership of our industry. So it's probably somebody you haven't heard of, but right now I'm very impressed with what Dawn has done and continues to do for the diversity agenda.
I think we're going to have to find Dawn and get to know Dawn because she does sound truly inspiring. So I have two questions from two of my faculty, but are both related to Airbus. So I'm going to share both with you and you can kind of pick and choose. The first one deals with Airbus's response to space travel and their suborbital spaceplane design. And if there's any comment you might have on the status of said spaceplane or the future of suborbital space travel.
I have to be honest and say that it's not something I'm particularly familiar with. Okay. It's been, the last time I worked on a space program was 1968, and it's changed a little since then. So I'm not up to date on the space program. I can tell you that Airbus has a long history in space, particularly with the very successful Ariane program. But of course, the space business is changing, and Airbus recognizes the need to change with it, particularly for the suborbital business. Having said that, I'm not familiar with what's going on at the moment, so my apologies.
Nope, I think that's fabulous, actually. It just brings home the fact that aviation, aerospace, and space are huge industries with lots of exciting developments, which leads to the second question. And this person wants to know, what are your thoughts with regard to Airbus or in general promoting urban mobility, including eVTOL, airspace management, regulations, infrastructure? So commenting on eVTOL.
I'm hesitating to answer because I don't want to sound discouraging. There's a huge amount of work going on. I mentioned earlier on the importance of entrepreneurial leadership in our business, and that's a very heavy focus in the eVTOL AAM business. And that's great, and I know several of the people involved. However, because there's always a however, I think the challenge with these businesses is that there's lots of people who may not have been through the full experience of managing a large aerospace program. It's really difficult. It's really difficult not just to design, develop, make, and have a reliable product in service for many years, but it's also really difficult to meet all the regulatory requirements. And I'm concerned that there's a lot of people in the eVTOL business, the AAM business, the UAV business, whatever you want to call it, who haven't been through that baptism of fire developing an aerospace program, and therefore underestimated. Yes, the technology is fine. Don't argue at all with the technology. It's really great, love it. But I think the people who are doing it underestimate the challenge of doing it reliably, meeting all the regulatory standards, which, by the way, as you know, do not exist at all right now. There aren't any. And so I think the challenges are underestimated by the people who are going into that business. There will be some of these programs, obviously most of them will not, but some of them will be successful, and they will probably come in places outside the USA. The regulatory environment is more favorable in places like Singapore and Dubai and Sao Paulo. But then the next challenge is, once you've got yourself a product, or once you've got it certified, and once you've got a regulatory system to operate it within, can you do it economically? Can you do it at a price that meets, I'll call it the mid-market? If you're in Sao Paulo today, the only way to get around is in a helicopter. Everybody knows this, but it's goddamn expensive. So the question is, can you do all this for not much more than the cost of an Uber? And again, I have very serious questions about that. So yes, it's going to come, but I think it's going to take a lot longer.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think it leads really nicely to another question. So that's certainly technology of the future, and as you say, regulatory issues of the future and the like. But during your career, what technologies or innovations had the most impact on you personally and your career?
I'm going to call it evolutionary rather than revolutionary. I worked most of my career in the airplane engines business. Airplane engines always lead the development of aeroplanes. If you look at, for example, the A320neo or the Airbus A350, I was heavily involved in both programs. In both cases, 2/3 of the efficiency improvement that those products brought over the previous generation came from the engine. The engine guy always has to start his programs 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years ahead of the airplane program. So the engine guy is investing a lot earlier without really knowing if the airplane's ever going to come along to hang it on. So the engine business is very challenging, and the engine business, the engine business has learned, I'll call it, to be evolutionary rather than revolutionary. A major step forward, however, having said that, was the geared turbofan. At IAE, we worked on a geared turbofan. It never came to the market. Pratt & Whitney subsequently brought it to the market. Small geared turbofans have been around for a long while, but no one had built one of the size that goes into the Pratt & Whitney geared turbofan. I believe that the geared turbofan is the future of the aero engine business for the next 15 to 20 years. And it's probably got a lot longer life than we think it has. So I would say that aero engines are the most important part. Aero engines tend to be evolutionary rather than revolutionary. But the geared turbofan really has been a step forward during my career.
I love that, and I think it's a great answer. I recently had someone tell me they thought the thing that had made their career most difficult was the smartphone. And I had to laugh because on some level, we all share that feeling that we're always connected. But I appreciate you went in the direction that made sense for this. That's great. All right, so here's a fun question. Everybody wants you to comment on competition. So what do you think, or what do you see in the current competition between Boeing and Airbus? And more importantly, do you think there's a role for another OEM in this competition?
I am a strong believer in competition. Airbus got to where it is today because it was number 2. And you remember the old Avis commercial, "We try harder," because they were number 2. So every morning, the folks in Airbus would get up and they would rally around a flag. I'm a strong believer in having a flag to rally around. And the flag is the competition. In this case, for Airbus, the flag was "Beat Boeing." Every morning we get up and we'd say to ourselves, "Got to beat Boeing." It's a terrific stimulator, not just for Airbus, but for everybody in the business to think that way. One morning, Airbus woke up and it had beaten Boeing. That is to say, it had sold more airplanes or delivered more airplanes than Boeing. And then life got a little bit more challenging because folks in Airbus didn't necessarily have that flag to rally around. Now, Airbus is still a great company, got great leadership, got great products. Boeing needs to, who am I to preach Boeing? I mean, Boeing's a fantastic company. I've worked with Boeing on and off throughout my whole career, either with them as a supplier or competing against them. I have a lot of friends at Boeing. Stan Deal's a big personal friend. So who am I to preach to Boeing what they need to do? But they really need to raise their game. They really need to launch a new airplane. For a dozen reasons, they need to launch a new airplane, including the fact that Airbus needs some competition to be working against. So even Airbus, I think, needs a stronger Boeing. The world needs a stronger Boeing than we see right now. And the best way to get to that is to launch a new airplane. I believe that Boeing has to launch a new airplane by the end of this year. Basically, a competitor to the A321neo. We could talk a lot about that. But yeah, I'm a strong believer in competition, and Boeing needs to get back into the saddle.
I love that you say that, because I agree. Competition makes us all better, whether it's between students on the athletic field or within our organizations that compete. It's a good thing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I'm going to close with one last question, and that comes from an anonymous attendee, but I'm guessing it's a student. And it says, what advice in regards to leadership do you have for students looking to move into their first managerial or leadership role?
I got a long list, so I hope you got time for a long list. First and foremost, and some of this we already covered, but it bears reiterating. First and foremost, get results. Whether you are in your first job or your last job, whether you're one of the members of the team or whether you're the leader of the team, whatever it is, you have to show that you can get results, positive results. There's no shortcut on that. Secondly, however, you also have to maintain your integrity and do the right thing. Everyone around you will know what the right thing to do is, so you better be doing it, because everybody else knows what you should be doing. We already mentioned aim high, be an inspiration to everybody else, generate a flag to rally around, or join a team that has a flag to rally around. It could be competition, it could be something else. Be humble. I talked about Frank Whittle and Neil Armstrong. Be really humble, but believe in yourself. And equally important, believe in others. Now, you're going to be disappointed. Believing in others has led to a lot of disappointment at times for me. That's when you have to make the tough decisions. But you've got to start off by believing in others, I think. Plan for change. Always expect change. You can't necessarily stop it. In fact, you're never going to stop it. Our industry is constantly meeting challenges. Just when we think we're on top of things, I remember Doug Parker at American declared that airlines are profitable forever. This was about 5 years ago. Unfortunately, we're not, because we cannot abolish business cycle. So always be prepared for change, and the best you can do is to plan to manage the change. Be compassionate, have empathy, have respect for others. It's kind of like being humble, but that will get you a long way. Balance all the stakeholders. Don't just be focused on profit. Everybody thinks business has to make a profit. Yes, it does. It's not our money, it's our investors' money, and we have to guard that money, and we have to make money for the investors to keep investing. But we also have to remember we have customers, we have employees, we have our communities, we have the media, we have all the other stakeholders. And to me, good leadership is trying to balance all those things, whilst at the end of the day, through that, making money for the shareholders so they come back and invest some more. Give credit where people are successful and take the blame yourself when they're not. That's really, we mentioned it earlier on, that's really important for a leader. Develop leadership bench strength. Be a mentor to those who want your job, assuming that you think they're capable of your job and they're worth your job. But don't shy away from having a strong bench working for you, and hopefully all of them want and are capable of doing your job, and mentor them to do so. Remember how to manage in a downturn. We're in a downturn right now. We have been for the last couple of years. This was at the end of a 14-year upcycle in the aerospace business. During that 14-year upcycle, we kind of forgot how to manage in the down cycle. So please keep trying to remember how to do that. And finally, my last point, long list, thrive on the challenge, it can't be done. Love it when people say it can't be done. And you reply, yeah, well, just let me show you. That's it.
I love it. My favorite answer to anything is watch me.
Yeah.
Sophia, last words for our guests before we conclude?
We've covered a lot of ground today. It's just my viewpoint. You really have to find your own direction, your own tenets. But sometimes, to me, it's been useful to listen to the old guys like me, because you're never going to have time to make all the mistakes yourself. So hopefully I've helped you along a little bit there, but you have to find your own way. If I can help in any other way, look forward to doing that, and hope to see you all in person sometime next year.
Thank you, Barry. Sophia?
Thank you for having me here, and thank you, Barry. It was such a pleasure to talk to you and have you here today. And thank you, Dean Gibson, for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
My pleasure.
And thank you, guests, for joining us. I hope you found it as enlightening and enjoyable as I have. And we will be back later this afternoon with a panel comprised of members of our Business Leadership Executive Board, who will be talking about success in aviation live. So please join us if you're local, or you can watch via stream as well. Everyone have a fabulous week. Take care. Fly high.